Hi, it's Hilarie again, and I am coming to you on the topics of joy, grief, and authenticity. And today I'm telling the story of Hollis. And in a previous episode, I talked about her birth, which brought a lot of joy to our lives. And I love telling that story. And this story is a lot heavier. So the next couple days were beautiful. We had lovely visitors. Some of our best friends came to see us, little ones even. She had never really cried, but they had said that a lot of that had to do with some of the meconium. We'd noticed that she just slept an awful lot. But then again, when you look around the hospital, there's a lot of signs that read the first 24 hours, your newborn baby, they're going to sleep a lot. So I had that in my head too. And then also she wasn't really breastfeeding very well. It was really hard to wake her up to get her to eat, and that was concerning. But I'd also heard that breastfeeding was really hard and that it takes a while for the two of you to get the hang of it. And so I wasn't really worried about that. I knew that it was first time for her, first time for me. It's gonna be okay, we'll figure it out. I kept repeating to the staff there at the hospital that, she hasn't cried yet, and we really haven't been eating very well. And I didn't get a lot of red flags. We were about to leave the hospital, so we packed our bags and we were ready to go home. The car seat was in the car. Jamin was about to take all the bags downstairs. We were waiting for my discharge papers and then her final test. And the final test that she really wasn't passing very well. Her temperature was a little low, so they were testing her oxygen in her hands and in her feet, and it really wasn't working very well. I still didn't know anything was terribly wrong. Hollis had been passing all of her tests. In fact, looking back, she had just barely passed all of her tests. And so it's interesting to look back and think that she was doing okay enough that we could have almost gone home, and then we never would have known what had happened. She would have died in her sleep. At that time, they decided to take her to the nursery. We'd like to heat her up. We'll take this test again, and we'll just kind of get this all figured out so y'all can go home. The pediatrician comes in, and so she heads off to the nursery to check her out, and comes back and is very, very boldly telling us that it's something probably very serious, and she's being transferred to the NICU. And it was all very direct and very much a shock for somebody who hadn't been a part of the experience at all to come in and tell us what was happening, and kind of scolded us a little bit that we didn't see it coming. She was like, your baby can't eat, your baby's not crying, there's all these, she can't breathe on her own, these are vital things, how are you surprised? And I remember walking down the hall and hearing all the healthy babies crying, and thinking about how she'd never really cried, and how those were healthy babies. Just thinking about how those are a lot of healthy babies on the other side of those doors. Before we got to see her, they gave us the photos that they take at the hospital. They take them and they print them off and they hand them to you, and it's just right at the end. Well, she had been transferred to the NICU, and they took those photos right whenever she was transferred to the NICU. So she has tubes and all of this, and it was just, I hadn't seen her like that, and they handed me the photos before I actually got to see her in the NICU. And so it was such a weird thing to receive photos of her that said, congratulations, on your new baby, and yet it was all these terrifying photos of her. She just looked so untouchable and so delicate, and I'd gone from holding her in my arms to her being there, and it was like she was their baby now. And it was just, I hated that feeling of not being able to touch her, and we could touch her, but I couldn't hold her. And I remember thinking, if I could just hold her, I will fix this. She was just fine when she's been in our room all these, days. Now suddenly everything's wrong, and that's, not the case, but that's what it felt like. If I could just hold her, we will fix this. I felt the barriers go up, as if I was too afraid to love her suddenly. And that scared me a lot, and I knew right away, like, I cannot let those barriers go up. I have to. We are her parents, and we will love her well. And we decided to come home that night, try to get some sleep so we could go back up there. At this point, we really didn't know what was wrong, and some NICUs are not built for family to be present. And so it was an instance where my body was healing. I was needing to pump milk for her all the time. There was hardly a place to sit down, and you always felt like you were in the way. And it was just so sad. We hated leaving the hospital without her, even though it was just for a few hours for the night. I slept with my iPad and pulled up the screen. They would live stream her bed, and so I could see her. And it was comforting, but I still felt like she was way too far away. And my favorite moment, though, was whenever my mom and dad, they came back because, you know, we were trying to figure out how serious this was, and asked if I'd like them to come back, and I was like, yes. And they brought my sister again, and so here they are trying to get time off work, and scared themselves. I was laying in bed, and I was looking, and I was crying and looking at the screen, and I knew my mom and dad were about to arrive there, and I saw my mom's hand touching Hollis, and that was so awesome, and it was so comforting to know that my parents were there with her. And my mom and my dad were both there, and so it helped me. I think I slept some, and would be why. That was the morning also that my brother texted me, my brother Wes texted, and it was a real simple text, but the phrase that stuck out to me was that he said, "You were made for this moment." And I really needed to hear that. So our family immediately started digging into our family history. It was amazing to sit in the waiting room and hear everybody making phone calls and sending text messages and emails and writing everything down. And it was really powerful to know that, like, we couldn't do much, but we could do that, and we were going to do that. I looked like a NICU mom, and I had on a ball cap and an extra baby in there somewhere, I felt like, and I couldn't pump enough because of everything that was happening, and so I was leaking, and you're vulnerable, and it's undignified is a word I've used a lot to describe the whole process of grief and going through something like this. It is undignified. I believe that's whenever Jamin and I had a conversation with each other about that this is looking really, really severe, and we think that it looks like it's gonna take a miracle. We don't know what it is, but it is bad, and we're going to pray for a miracle. It was amazing to have so many friends and family come up. That we were still at Baylor at that point, and they came up to the NICU and brought pizza and magazines and fingernail polish and just the most creative, thoughtful things. So we decided to transfer her to Children's, and that was her very first car ride. Her first and only car ride was in a ambulance. We arrived and got settled, and I convinced Jamin that he really needed to go home, and he needed to get some sleep, and it's really hard for him to get sleep, and I wanted to make sure that he got some sleep, and I was going to stay there, and my sister was going to stay with me, and so only 2 people at a time could be with her, and so the 2 of us stayed in there, and I fell asleep to the sight and sound of my sister praying over my daughter and reading her scripture and listening to praise and worship music and singing to her. It was a relief to be in her room, in her presence, and to have a physical space where I could sit in a recliner and sleep and still be with her and know that if that was the last moment, it would be okay. Dr. Angela Shirley was the genetics doctor, and I'm blanking on the exact term, and she was telling her staff, what to do, and I really appreciated how direct she was with them about this baby has been here for several hours now. Why haven't these tests been done? Why hasn't this happened? Where's the results? Whenever you have no control of the situation, it feels really good to hear somebody in control. And doctors came and took us into a big conference room, and there was about 6 or 7 doctors, and we knew that good news doesn't take that many messengers. And we knew that it was something that was really severe and that babies may live months. Some kids live years, but it's a very, very hard life. And we've now confirmed that we are carriers, and that messes with your head too. And to know that there's a 1 in 4 chance it will happen to another baby that you have. We also just didn't know how much pain she was in, and that was concerning for us because there were a lot of seizures involved, and we had heard her having hiccups, and there was some question about whether they were hiccups or seizures, or if the hiccups hurt her. They transferred Hollis to a different room where we could access her easier. We didn't have to wash our hands suddenly. We didn't have to wear no longer trying to protect her. We can't protect her from the situation anymore. It's really, really nice to be able to bring all of our family into a big room that was hers, and they could touch her and love her and kiss her, and I could too. And I still couldn't hold her. I still believed that if I could hold her, if I could just hold her. Friday night, they let us hold her all night long, and it also stormed that night, and that was a really satisfying memory for me because it felt like God was just as angry about the injustice of her life being cut so short. It felt like he was just pissed.